Why do we idolize people who treat others like dirt? It is a question metal fans ask constantly. From greed to violence, these stars have done it all. One guitarist is so arrogant, he unleashed fury on an airline staff member over nothing. But the worst offender is a man whose hate speech was caught on camera for everyone to see. You are about to learn the truth about your heroes. 1. Varg Vikernes of Burzum. We have to start with the most extreme story in the history of music. This takes us back to the early 90s in Norway. It was a cold and dark scene known as black metal. Varg Vikernes was the man behind the one-man band Burzum. He was talented, but he had some very dangerous ideas. He was part of a circle that wanted to shock society. They started burning down historic churches. These were buildings that had stood for hundreds of years, and they destroyed them just to make a statement. But the property damage was not the worst part. Varg had a rivalry with another musician named Øystein Arseth, who went by the stage name Euronymous. He played guitar for the band Mayhem. Tensions were high between them over money and leadership of the scene. In August of 1993, Varg drove nearly 300 miles from Bergen to Oslo. He claimed he heard a rumor that Øystein planned to capture him, so he decided to strike first. He showed up at the apartment in the middle of the night. An argument started almost immediately. It turned physical very quickly. Varg pulled out a knife and ended Øystein's life. The police report said the victim had 23 wounds. It was a brutal attack that shocked the entire country. When Varg went to trial, he did not look sorry. In fact, he smiled for the cameras when the judge read the verdict. He was sent to prison for 21 years, which is the maximum sentence in Norway. Even after he got out, he continued to spread hateful beliefs and views that most people find totally unacceptable. He remains the most controversial figure in metal history. But while Varg was dangerous because of his beliefs, the next person on our list made enemies for a very different reason. This guy upset millions of people just by being greedy. 2. Lars Ulrich of Metallica is arguably the biggest metal band in the world. They fill stadiums that are thousands of feet wide. The drummer, Lars Ulrich, is the one who runs the business side of things. For a long time, fans loved him. But then the internet arrived. A program called Napster allowed people to share songs for free. Lars did not like this one bit. He felt that the band was losing money. Most artists were annoyed, but Lars took it to a whole new level. He decided to sue Napster, but he did not stop there. He actually went after the fans. He had a team track down over 300,000 people who had downloaded Metallica songs. He delivered a literal truckload of paperwork to the Napster office listing all those names. He wanted them banned from the service. Fans were furious. They felt betrayed. They had spent hundreds of dollars on concert tickets and t-shirts over the years. Now the drummer was treating them like criminals. It was a public relations disaster. Lars was seen as a rich rock star who only cared about his bank account. Even years later, people have not forgotten. There is a story that in 2016, the band offered a special deluxe box set. It cost $150, but some fans joked that you were just paying for a brick because Lars wanted every penny he could get. Lars might be greedy, but at least he usually shows up on time. The next singer on our list became famous for making thousands of people wait for hours while he threw tantrums backstage. 3. Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses. In the late 80s and early 90s, Guns N' Roses was the biggest band on the planet. The singer Axl Rose was an incredible performer, but he was also a nightmare to work with. He had a reputation for being incredibly late to his own concerts. Fans would wait in the arena for 2 or 3 hours past the start time. They would get restless and angry. Sometimes he would not show up until after midnight. One famous incident happened in St. Louis in 1991. During the show, Axl saw a fan taking pictures. He did not like that. He shouted at security to take the camera. When they did not move fast enough, he dove into the crowd himself. He tackled the fan and punched him. Then he climbed back on stage and smashed his microphone. He yelled that he was going home, and he stormed off. The concert ended right there. The crowd went crazy. A huge riot broke out. Fans tore the seats apart and destroyed the gear. Dozens of people were hurt. Axl had a history of this kind of behavior. He also fired his own band members for their personal struggles. He kicked out the drummer Steven Adler because of his issues with dangerous substances. It seemed unfair because the whole band was living a wild lifestyle. Axl acted like he was the boss and everyone else was disposable. Axl was difficult, but mostly he hurt the fans' feelings and their wallets. The next guy on our list has a reputation for being genuinely mean and saying things that are deeply hurtful to entire groups of people. 4. Phil Anselmo of Pantera. Phil Anselmo was the voice of the legendary band Pantera. They changed heavy metal in the 90s with a groovy and aggressive sound. Phil was seen as a tough guy icon, but over the years, his behavior has disappointed a lot of people. He struggled with heavy substances for a long time. In 1996, he actually had a medical emergency backstage after a show because of it. His heart stopped for several minutes before paramedics brought him back. That is sad, but his behavior toward others is what lands him here. He has a history of making rants on stage that are very offensive. He often targets people based on their background or skin color. The most shocking moment happened in 2016. Hitchishia was at a tribute concert for his former bandmate who had passed away. At the end of the show, Phil made a gesture with his arm that is associated with hateful regimes from World War II. He then shouted a slogan about white power. It was all caught on video. The metal community was outraged. People could not believe he would do that at a memorial show. Phil tried to say it was an inside joke about white wine, but nobody bought that excuse. It showed a side of him that was ugly and hateful. He lost a lot of respect that day. Phil's outbursts are loud and public. The next musician is more calculated. He is known for being a control freak who keeps his bandmates on a very short leash. 5. James Hetfield of Metallica. We are back to Metallica again. While Lars is the business shark, James Hetfield is the controlling leader. He is the voice and the rhythm guitar player. For a long time, he did not let anyone else have a say in the music. The sad story here involves the bass player Jason Newsted. Jason joined the band after their original bassist passed away in a tragic bus accident. Instead of welcoming Jason, the band treated him terribly. James led the way in bullying him. They would dump his clothes out of his suitcase or order huge meals and put them on his room tab. They called it hazing, but it went on for 14 years. It was cruel. The breaking point came when Jason wanted to do a side project. He wanted to record some music with other friends during his time off. James said no. He told Jason that he could not do it. He said that doing a side project was like betraying the band. It was a double standard because other members had done things outside the band. Jason finally quit because he could not take the control anymore. James has also had moments where he was rude to strangers. There are stories of him kicking a dog that was in his way. It shows a lack of patience and a need to be in charge of everything. James wanted total loyalty, but our next star treats loyalty like a business transaction. He is famous for claiming that he has slept with thousands of women and he cares more about money than music. 6. Gene Simmons of Kiss. Gene Simmons is the bass player for Kiss. You know him as the demon with the long tongue and the face paint. He is a marketing genius. He will put the KISS logo on anything from coffins to toilet paper. But his personality rubs a lot of people the wrong way. He is incredibly arrogant. He loves to brag about his intimate life. He claims he has been with nearly 5,000 women. He talks about women like they are just numbers or trophies to collect. He is also very cold when it comes to his bandmates. The original drummer Peter Criss and the guitarist Ace Frehley had struggles with addiction. Instead of helping them, Gene just saw them as liabilities. He fired them and hired new guys to wear their makeup. He said that being in a band is just a job. He does not seem to have any sentimental feelings. There is a famous interview where he insults people who struggle with sadness and mental health. He basically said they should just get over it or end it all. It was very insensitive. He later apologized, but it showed how little empathy he has for people who are hurting. To him, life is just about winning and making cash. Gene loves money, but the next guitarist on the list loves holding a grudge. He was fired from a huge band decades ago, and he still talks about it to this day. 7. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth. Dave Mustaine is the leader of Megadeth. He is an amazing guitar player, but his claim to fame is that he was the original guitarist for Metallica before they got famous. He was kicked out of the band in 1983 because he was too wild and aggressive when he drank. They put him on a bus from New York back to California and sent him home. That was 40 years ago, but Dave is still bitter about it. For years, he complained in every interview about how Metallica stole his music and his ideas. He formed Megadeth just to be faster and heavier than them. It was fueled by pure anger. He creates a lot of drama. He has fired so many band members that it is hard to keep count. He also says some very strange things. In recent years, he became very religious and started refusing to play on the same stage as bands he calls evil. He once caused a huge problem at a festival in Greece. He refused to play if a band called Rotting Christ was on the bill. The promoter had to cancel the other band just to keep Dave happy. He also claimed that he used magic to curse his enemies in the past. He is a very difficult person to reason with. Dave fights with other bands, but the next guy on our list seems to hate his own fans and the music scene that made him rich. 8. Kerry King of Slayer. Slayer was one of the heaviest bands in history. Their guitarist, Kerry King, looks very intimidating with his bald head and tattoos. He is known for being brutally honest, but often he is just mean. He loves to trash other bands in the press. In the 90s, a new style called nu metal became popular. Bands like Slipknot and Machine Head were getting big. Kerry King hated them. He called them garbage and sellouts. He insulted the band Machine Head, specifically saying they were fakes. It was very disrespectful to fellow musicians who looked up to him. He acts like the gatekeeper of heavy metal. If he does not like it, then it is not real metal. He even criticized his own bandmates sometimes. When Slayer retired, he did not seem very emotional about it. He just wanted to move on to his next project. He has a very cold attitude. He seems to think that he is the only one who knows what good music is. It makes him look bitter and out of touch with what younger fans enjoy. Kerry King is verbally aggressive, but the next musician was physically dangerous. He was a drummer who influenced metal, but he was a terror to be around. 9. Ginger Baker of Cream. Ginger Baker was the drummer for the band Cream. They were a rock band in the 60s, but their heavy sound influenced the first metal bands. Ginger was a monster behind the drum kit and a monster in real life. He had a hair-trigger temper. He would scream and fight over the smallest things. His relationship with the bass player Jack Bruce was legendary for being toxic. They hated each other. Ginger once pulled a knife on Jack during a show. Another time, he attacked the guitarist Eric Clapton. He hit him with a drumstick so hard it drew blood. He was unpredictable. There is a documentary about him called Beware of Mr. Baker. In the movie, the director tries to interview him. Ginger gets angry at the end and actually hits the director in the face with his cane, breaking the man's nose. Even as an old man, he was violent. He lived a life of chaos and pushed away almost everyone who tried to get close to him. Ginger was violent with his hands, but the next person is a villain because of his massive ego. He is technically a Beach Boy, but his bad attitude is legendary in all of music. 10. Mike Love of the Beach Boys. You might wonder what a Beach Boy is doing on a heavy metal list, but Mike Love is such a disliked figure that metal fans hate him too. He represents everything that is wrong with the music industry. He is the cousin of the genius songwriter Brian Wilson. Brian wrote all the beautiful music that made the band famous. Mike just wrote the lyrics about cars and surfing, but Mike wanted all the credit. He sued his own cousin to get his name on the songs and get more money. He was jealous of Brian's talent. When the band was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Mike gave a speech that is now infamous. He insulted the Beatles and Mick Jagger. He challenged everyone in the room. It was embarrassing. He tours under the name The Beach Boys, but he excludes Brian Wilson and the other original members. He basically hijacked the band's name to make money for himself. He is seen as the ultimate corporate villain who crushed the artistic spirit of his own family. Mike Love ruined his family's vibe, but the next singer ruined a family's life forever. His actions caused a tragedy that he never truly paid for. 11. Vince Neil of Motley Crue. Motley Crue was the wildest band of the 80s. They partied harder than anyone, but in 1984, the fun turned into a nightmare. The singer, Vince Neil, was having a party at his house. He ran out of liquid refreshments, so he decided to drive to the store. He took the drummer from the band Hanoi Rocks with him. His name was Razzle. Vince was in no condition to drive. He was swerving down the road and lost control of his sports car. He crashed head-on into another vehicle. The passenger, Razzle, was hurt badly, and he did not survive the accident. The people in the other car were left with permanent brain damage. It was a horrible event. But the thing that makes people angry is what happened next. Vince barely served any time in jail. He was in there for less than 3 weeks. He paid a fine and did some community service. Then he went right back to touring and making millions of dollars. He even released an album shortly after. Many people feel he never really learned his lesson or showed enough remorse for taking a life. It is a dark stain on his legacy that never goes away. Vince walked away from a disaster, but the next guitarist creates disasters wherever he goes because he thinks he is royalty. 12. Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie Malmsteen is a guitar player from Sweden. He is incredibly fast and talented. He brought classical music into heavy metal, but his ego is even bigger than his hair. He treats everyone around him like servants. He has fired dozens of singers and musicians because he wants all the spotlight. There is a famous audio recording of him on a plane. He got into an argument with a fellow passenger. Yngwie lost his temper completely. He screamed that he had unleashed the fury. It sounded like something a cartoon villain would say. He was so full of himself. Another time he was in a hotel in Tokyo. He felt that the staff was not respecting him enough. He got angry and threw a glass of water at a waiter. He was arrested for it. He acts like he is a king from the 18th century. He refuses to share the stage. In interviews, he says that he does not need a band, he just needs backing tracks. It is very hard to root for someone who loves himself that much. Yngwie yells at waiters, but the next guy yells at the entire world. He is a hunter who uses his platform to spread very extreme political views. 13. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent is known as the Motor City Madman. He plays guitar and sings about hunting and the outdoors. But in recent years, he has become more famous for his angry political rants. He is very extreme. He has said terrible things about presidents and leaders. He called a former president a subhuman mongrel. That is a very hateful thing to say. He is also a big supporter of gun rights, which is fine, but he is very aggressive about it. He insults anyone who disagrees with him. What makes him look like a hypocrite is his history with the military draft. He loves to talk about being a patriot, but when it was his turn to go to war in the 60s, he reportedly used crazy tactics to avoid it. He stopped washing and soiled his pants so the army would reject him. Now he acts like a tough soldier, but he ran away when it counted. He pushes people away with his hateful language. He has been banned from playing at certain venues because his speech is considered dangerous. Ted targets politicians, but the next musician targeted a specific group of people with a very hateful message. 14. Bradley Dean of Junkyard Prophet. You might not know the name Bradley Dean. He was in a band called Junkyard Prophet. They were a metal band that played at schools. They would tell the schools they were there to talk about making good choices. But once they got on stage, it was a bait and switch. Bradley Dean would start preaching extreme anti-gay messages. He called people with different lifestyles criminals and terrorists. He told high school kids that those people were evil. It was very manipulative. The schools had no idea this was coming. Parents were furious that their kids were being exposed to such hate during the school day. He used the music as a trap to spread his agenda. It is one of the most dishonest things a band can do. He was not there to entertain. He was there to judge and condemn. Bradley Dean used words as weapons. The next singer wore his hate on his chest, literally. 15. Sebastian Bach of Skid Row. Sebastian Bach was the lead singer of Skid Row. He had an amazing voice and was a huge heartthrob. But in 1989, he made a massive mistake. He went on stage wearing a t-shirt with a very offensive slogan. The shirt said that AIDS kills a certain group of people, followed by the phrase, dead. It was a cruel joke about a serious disease that was hurting thousands of people. At the time, he tried to laugh it off. He acted like it was no big deal, but it showed a complete lack of maturity and kindness. Later in life, he apologized and said he was young and stupid. But for many fans, the damage was done. You cannot unsee something like that. It remains a shameful moment in rock history. Sebastian wore a bad shirt, but the next musician committed a violent crime that shocked the world. 16. Gaal of Gorgoroth. Gaal was the vocalist for the black metal band Gorgoroth. He was known for being terrifying on stage, but his real life was even scarier. In 2002, he was at a party. He got into a fight with a man. The situation escalated way beyond a normal fistfight. Gaal assaulted the man for hours. He collected the man's blood into a cup and threatened to make him drink it. It was like something out of a nightmare. He was sentenced to prison for the assault. What makes the story complex is that years later, Gaal came out and revealed he was gay. He was actually the one being harassed at the party initially, but the level of violence he used in return was extreme and criminal. It solidified his reputation as one of the most dangerous men in metal. Gaal's violence was personal. The next character was an alien monster on stage, but faced serious accusations off stage. 17. Oderus Urungus of GWAR. Dave Brockie played the character Oderus Urungus in the band GWAR. They are famous for wearing giant monster costumes and spraying the crowd with fake fluids. It is all comedy and theater. Dave was a brilliant artist and writer, but toward the end of his life, things got dark. He struggled with serious substance issues. He died from an overdose in 2014. After he passed away, bad stories started to come out. Some people who worked with him accused him of being abusive and stealing artwork. They said he took credit for things other people created. It was a sad end for a creative genius. It showed that even the funny monster on stage had demons that he could not control. Dave Brockie had hidden struggles, but the next singer was a wild man who loved to start riots. 18. Paul Bailoff of Exodus. Paul Bailoff wasn't just the original singer for the legendary Bay Area thrash band Exodus. He was the physical embodiment of the genre's most chaotic instincts. While other singers tried to hit high notes or sound melodic, Paul didn't care about any of that. He was a pure maniac on the microphone. He famously admitted that he didn't have the best voice in the world, but what he lacked in pitch, he made up for with an intensity that was actually frightening to watch. His philosophy on live performances was simple and brutal. If you were not bleeding by the end of the night, you were not having fun. This wasn't just a catchy slogan for him. It was a rule. During the early 80s, while bands like Metallica were starting to refine their sound, Bailoff was screaming at crowds to destroy each other. He viewed the mosh pit not as a place to dance, but as a combat zone. He would pause the show to specifically point out people who were standing still or looking too safe, and he would demand that the crowd attack them. He famously hated posers. For Paul, posing was a crime punishable by violence. He created an atmosphere where you had to be tough to survive an Exodus concert. If you wore the wrong shirt or had the wrong haircut, Paul would let you know about it over the PA system. This attitude helped make their debut album, Bonded by Blood, a classic, but it also created a dangerous environment. However, Paul's destructive lifestyle wasn't just an act for the stage. He lived as hard as he screamed. His substance abuse issues spiraled out of control very quickly. By the time the band was ready to record their second album, Paul was in such bad shape that he couldn't function in the studio. The rest of the band had no choice but to fire him because his addiction made it impossible to record vocals. Sadly, Paul never really slowed down. He passed away in 2002 after suffering a massive stroke, which many attributed to years of hard living. Today, he is a legend to thrash metal purists because he never sold out. But looking back, his encouragement of actual violence got a lot of people hurt at shows, leaving a complicated legacy. Paul loved metal too much, perhaps to his own detriment. But strangely enough, the next guitarist on our list is famous for saying he actually hates the music that made him rich. 19. Brent Hinds of Mastodon. Mastodon is widely considered one of the most important and respected metal bands of the modern era. They are known for complex rhythms and heavy, sludge-filled riffs. A huge part of that sound comes from their guitarist and vocalist, Brent Hinds. He is a phenomenal player with a unique style that mixes country chicken picking with heavy distortion. But despite his success, Brent has a very weird relationship with heavy metal. In a now infamous interview with Guitar Player magazine, Brent dropped a total bombshell that shocked the fan base. He bluntly stated, "I hate heavy metal." He didn't stop there. He went on to explain that he doesn't listen to the genre in his free time and implied that he thinks the entire style is lowbrow and unintelligent. He claimed he only plays it because it pays the bills and because he happens to be good at it. Fans were confused and honestly a bit insulted. It is rare to see a musician actively bite the hand that feeds them. Why play in a band that tours with Slayer if you hate the genre? It created a strange tension where the fans worship his guitar playing, but he seems to look down on them for enjoying it. Beyond his musical opinions, Brent has a reputation for being difficult and volatile. He has a history of getting into drunken fights that end poorly for him. The most famous incident happened in Las Vegas after the MTV Video Music Awards. Brent got into a drunken brawl with Shavo Odagian, the bassist from System of a Down. It wasn't just a little scuffle. Brent ended up knocked out cold on the pavement. The injury was so severe he suffered a brain hemorrhage and a broken nose, and he had to be hospitalized for a long time. He is also known for having a very short fuse in interviews. He often uses slurs and offensive language when he is angry or trying to be edgy. He seems like a guy who is undeniably talented but completely miserable to be around. Finally, we have a singer who thought he was a messiah sent from above, but in reality, he was just a mess. 20. Scott Stapp of Creed. Scott Stapp was the voice of Creed, one of the biggest rock bands in history. In the late 90s and early 2000s, you could not turn on a radio without hearing his voice. They sold millions of albums, and they were on top of the world. But Scott let the fame go to his head almost instantly. He stopped acting like a musician and started acting like he was a prophet or a spiritual leader. He demanded to be treated like royalty by his crew and his bandmates. His ego became so inflated that he believed he was the only reason for the band's success. But the cracks in his reality started to show very publicly. The absolute low point came in 2002 during a concert at the Allstate Arena in Chicago. Scott walked onto the stage in no condition to perform. He was completely intoxicated. He couldn't remember the lyrics to his own hit songs. At one point, he passed out on stage, then woke up and just rolled around on the floor, appearing confused and mumbling into the microphone. It was a disaster. It was so bad that the fans actually filed a class action lawsuit against the band, demanding a refund because Scott failed to perform. That is almost unheard of in rock history. Things didn't get better after Creed broke up. Years later, Scott posted a series of videos online that were truly disturbing. In a paranoid rant, he claimed that the CIA and the IRS had frozen all his bank accounts and that he was penniless, living in a truck. He claimed there was a massive government conspiracy against him. It was clear he was suffering a major mental health crisis. He also had a violent streak. He once tried to fight the entire band 311 in a hotel lobby in Baltimore because he thought they looked at him the wrong way. He ended up getting beaten up in the process. While he has since tried to recover and get his life back on track, his years of being a diva and his public meltdowns made him one of the most mocked figures in rock history. The 20 were a wild time for heavy metal, and these stars were on top of the world. But when the music scene changed overnight, one of the most famous faces in rock went from superstardom to working a desk job, his fortune completely gone. 1. K. Downing, the priest who lost his temple. You might be wondering how a founding member of Judas Priest, one of the most legendary metal bands of all time, could ever run into money problems. K. Downing wasn't just a guitarist. He was a key architect of the band's sound, a multimillionaire who had earned his place in rock history. But what most people don't realize is that his passion outside of music would lead to his financial ruin. Downing poured his heart, soul, and a fortune into a personal project, a luxury golf resort and hotel at his estate in Shropshire, England. He envisioned it as a world-class destination. The problem was, building a high-end resort costs a mind-boggling amount of money. The project was plagued by delays and went wildly over budget. Truth be told, he was sinking millions of his own cash into a black hole. It's crazy to think about, but the very thing he hoped would be his legacy became an anchor dragging him down. The financial strain became so immense that it contributed to his decision to leave Judas Priest in 2011, a band he had been in for over 40 years. He had to sell his share of the band's rights just to try and cover the debts from his failed resort. He went from being a metal god to a man fighting to save his home. Downing's story is a tough lesson in business, but his financial fall was slow. The next star lost it all in a blink. 2. Vince Neil, the voice that outspent a fortune. Motley Crue was the definition of 80s excess. They sold over 100 million records, and at the front of it all was Vince Neil, the charismatic singer whose face was on posters in millions of bedrooms. The money flowed like water, and Neil spent it even faster. The thing is, his financial troubles weren't a one-time event. They were a lifestyle. He had a passion for starting businesses, but unfortunately, he had unbelievably bad luck. He launched his own airline, Vince Neil Aviation, which was a spectacular failure that burned through cash. He opened tattoo parlors, bars, and even a tequila brand. While some had brief moments of success, many of them folded, costing him a fortune each time. What's often overlooked is that Neil's lavish personal spending never slowed down. He had a fleet of exotic cars, homes, and an appetite for the high life that even his massive royalty checks couldn't always support. There were multiple times throughout his career, especially after he briefly left Motley Crue in the 90s, that he found himself in serious financial trouble, facing lawsuits and mounting bills. He was a rock star who simply couldn't stop spending, a lesson in how fast a massive fortune can disappear when you treat your bank account like an open bar. If a string of bad businesses sounds rough, imagine losing it all because the entire world decided your music was no longer cool. 3. Dee Snider, the Twisted Sister star, left straight, broke. Dee Snider was the mouthpiece of a generation. As the frontman for Twisted Sister, he was one of the most recognizable figures in music, screaming anthems like, "We're not gonna take it." In the mid-'80s, he was on top of the world. He had a mansion, fancy cars, and was a household name. But the music industry is a fickle beast. What most people don't realize is how fast the party ended. When the grunge scene exploded in the early 90s, bands like Twisted Sister were seen as relics of the past. Their record sales plummeted, the tours dried up, and suddenly the money was gone. Dee has been incredibly open about his fall. He made some bad investments, trusting the wrong people, and by the late 90s he was flat broke. He lost his house and had to take on any job he could to support his family. It's crazy to think about, but the man who once defied Congress was now working a 9-to-5 office job and doing voiceovers for commercials. His story is a powerful reminder that in the music world, fame is not forever, and a fortune can vanish as quickly as the trend that created it. Dee Snider had to rebuild from nothing, but the next star on our list faced a battle not with the industry, but with his own health. 4. Mick Mars, the quiet man's costly war. Mick Mars was the quiet, mysterious engine of Motley Crue. His heavy, blues-inspired guitar riffs were the backbone of their sound. While the other members were famous for their wild antics, Mars was known for his private nature. The thing is, he was hiding a secret battle. Since he was a teenager, Mars has suffered from ankylosing spondylitis, a severe and painful form of arthritis that fuses the bones in the spine. For decades, he toured the world in constant, agonizing pain. This condition not only took a physical toll, but also a massive financial one. The medical bills for managing such a chronic illness are astronomical. Over the years, he has undergone numerous surgeries and treatments, all of which cost a fortune. What's often overlooked is that his condition eventually made it impossible for him to keep up with the grueling demands of touring. This led to his retirement from the road and ultimately a bitter legal dispute with the band he helped create. He claimed they were trying to push him out and unfairly cut his share of the profits. Legal battles like that are incredibly expensive, draining millions in fees. His story is a heartbreaking example of how a lifetime of success can be undone by forces completely outside your control. A fight with your own band is one thing, but our next rocker took on the most powerful couple in metal and paid a steep price. 5. Carmine Appice, the drummer who battled an Ozzy-pocalypse. Carmine Appice is a drumming legend. He played with everyone from Vanilla Fudge to Rod Stewart. In the early 80s, he landed a dream gig, joining Ozzy Osbourne's band for the Bark at the Moon album and tour. You might be wondering how a job like that could lead to financial disaster. Truth be told, it all fell apart in a storm of lawsuits. Appice was not just a drummer in the band. He claimed he was also a songwriter who helped pen some of the tracks. But when it came time to get paid his writing royalties, he said the money never came. This led him to sue Ozzy and, more pointedly, his manager and wife, Sharon Osbourne. What most people don't realize is that taking on the Osbournes in court is like fighting a hurricane. They have a reputation for being incredibly tough in business. The legal fight dragged on, costing Appice a fortune in lawyers' fees. He eventually settled, but the entire ordeal left him financially and emotionally drained. It was a brutal lesson that in the music business, sometimes the biggest battles aren't on stage, but in the courtroom. Legal fights over money are common, but the next star's problem started the moment he was kicked out of the biggest metal band on earth. 6. Paul Di'Anno, the Iron Maiden voice left behind. Before Bruce Dickinson, there was Paul Di'Anno. He was the original voice of Iron Maiden, his raw, punk-infused vocals defining their first 2 albums. He was on the cusp of global superstardom, but his wild lifestyle and unreliable behavior got him fired from the band right as they were about to explode. The thing is, this single event sent his life into a financial tailspin from which he never truly recovered. While his former bandmates went on to become multi-millionaires playing in stadiums, Di'Anno was left to scrape by in smaller bands. What's often overlooked is that he didn't have the massive royalty checks that the other members enjoyed from the later, more successful albums. His income was a fraction of what it could have been. To make matters worse, years of hard living took a serious toll on his health, leading to major knee problems that left him unable to walk without assistance. The medical bills piled up, and without the safety net of Iron Maiden's fortune, he had to rely on donations from fans to fund his surgeries. It's a tragic tale of what might have been, and a stark look at how one bad break can cost you everything. Di'Anno lost his spot in a legendary band, but the next singer lost his entire band in a messy public divorce. 7. Geoff Tate, the ousted voice of Queensryche. For 30 years, Geoff Tate was the unmistakable voice and face of the progressive metal band Queensryche. They sold millions of albums and were known for their intelligent, conceptual music. Tate was living the dream, but what most people don't realize is that behind the scenes, tensions were boiling over. In 2012, the band had a spectacular and ugly breakup, with the other members firing Tate. This didn't just end his time with the band. It kicked off a nasty and incredibly expensive legal war over who had the right to use the Queensryche name. It's crazy to think about, but both sides were touring under the same name at the same time, confusing fans and racking up massive legal bills. The fight went on for years, a public soap opera that cost both parties millions. In the end, a settlement was reached, with Tate losing the right to the name. The lawsuit completely drained his finances, forcing him to tour relentlessly under his own name just to make ends meet. It was a bitter end to a legendary partnership, proving that creative differences can lead to financial devastation. A legal fight over a band name is brutal, but for the next frontman, the battle was with the changing times and his own choices. 8. Stephen Pearcy, the rat that hit a wall. In the heyday of the Sunset Strip, Rat was king. With massive hits and a look that defined glam metal, frontman Stephen Pearcy was the ultimate rock star. The money was flowing, and the party seemed like it would never end. But it did. The thing is, when the music scene shifted in the 90s, bands like Rat were left in the dust. The stadium tours and platinum albums disappeared almost overnight. What many have overlooked is that Pearcy's troubles were compounded by years of intense personal struggles and a lifestyle of excess that was hard to maintain without the massive income. The band went through multiple messy breakups and reunions, often leading to legal squabbles over royalties and the band's name. Pearcy launched solo projects, but they never reached the commercial heights of Rat. He found himself in a position where the cost of his lifestyle and the lingering legal issues far outweighed the money he was making. It was a classic story of a star who was unprepared for the day the music stopped. The decline of a whole genre can be tough, but what if you lose control of the very songs you wrote? That's what happened to our next artist. 9. Johnny Lane, the Cherry Pie Man's bitter end. Warrant was another giant of the glam metal era, and their mega hit Cherry Pie made frontman Johnny Lane a superstar. He wrote the songs, sang the vocals, and was the creative force behind the band. You would think that would make him rich for life. But the truth be told, the music business can be a cruel place. What most people don't realize is that in a moment of financial desperation early in his career, Lane signed a deal that gave away the publishing rights to his songs for a very small amount of money. It's a decision that haunted him for the rest of his life. Every time Cherry Pie was played on the radio, in a movie, or in a commercial, someone else was getting the lion's share of the money. He was the man who wrote the song, but he was barely getting paid for it. This, combined with the decline of his genre and his own deep personal battles, left him in a constant state of financial struggle. He tragically passed away in 2011, a cautionary tale about the importance of understanding the business behind the music. Johnny Lane lost his fortune on paper. The next rock queen lost hers in a courtroom battle that had nothing to do with music. 10. Lita Ford, the Queen of Metal's painful divorce. Lita Ford was a true trailblazer. She shredded on guitar with the Runaways and then launched a hugely successful solo career in the 80s, becoming one of the few women to dominate the metal scene. She was a certified rock icon with the money and fame to prove it. But what many have overlooked is that her empire came crashing down because of a devastatingly difficult divorce. After her music career cooled down, she stepped away from the spotlight to raise her 2 sons. When her marriage ended, it led to a brutal and prolonged legal battle. Ford has publicly stated that the process left her completely broke. She claimed she lost everything: her home, her savings, and even her guitars. It's crazy to think about, but she had to start over from scratch with nothing but her name and her talent. She had to fight her way back, releasing new music and touring again, not just for the love of it, but out of pure necessity to rebuild her life. It's a powerful story of resilience, but also a stark reminder of how personal turmoil can wipe out a professional fortune. A messy divorce is one thing, but getting kicked out of your legendary band twice is a whole other level of financial strain. 11. Dave Ellefson, the Megadeth bassist's roller coaster ride. Dave Ellefson was there from the beginning. As the co-founding bassist of Megadeth, he was a crucial part of one of the big 4 of thrash metal. For decades, he toured the world and enjoyed the financial rewards of being in a legendary band. The thing is, his journey was anything but stable. In 2002, when Dave Mustaine disbanded Megadeth due to a nerve injury, Ellefson found himself out of a job. He sued Mustaine over royalties and rights, a legal battle that cost him dearly and created a huge rift between the two. When Mustaine reformed Megadeth, Ellefson was not invited back. He had to find new ways to make a living, from other bands to working in artist relations for a gear company. He eventually rejoined the band, but his financial stability was rocked again when he was fired in 2021 after a personal scandal. Each time he was out of the band, he lost his primary source of income and had to rebuild, a financially draining process for any musician, even one from a band as big as Megadeth. Ellefson had to start over multiple times, but our next artist experienced a public breakdown so severe he claimed to be completely homeless. 12. Scott Stapp, the Creed singer's fall from grace. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Creed was arguably the biggest rock band in the world. They sold more than 50 million albums, and singer Scott Stapp was a global superstar. His net worth was estimated to be in the tens of millions. But what most people don't realize is that beneath the surface, Stapp was in the midst of a serious personal crisis. After the band broke up, his behavior became increasingly erratic. The story reached a shocking climax in 2014 when he posted a series of videos online claiming he was completely broke and living in his truck. He made wild accusations, saying his money had been stolen and his bank accounts frozen. It was a stunning and very public collapse for a man who had been at the pinnacle of the music industry just a few years earlier. The incident revealed the depth of his personal struggles, which had completely derailed his life and career, leaving him with nothing. Thankfully, Stapp eventually got the help he needed and has worked hard to rebuild his life and career. But his story remains one of the most dramatic financial falls in modern rock history. Stapp's fall was shockingly public. The next musician's downfall happened away from the cameras as he quietly faded from view. 13. Travis Meeks, the days of the new genius who vanished. Days of the New exploded onto the scene in 1997 with a sound unlike anything else. Their debut album was a massive hit, and at the center of it was a young prodigy named Travis Meeks. He was hailed as a genius, a brilliant songwriter and guitarist with a huge career ahead of him. The money started pouring in. But the thing is, Meeks couldn't handle the pressure of fame. His journey is a tragic story of a gifted artist consumed by his own personal demons. After firing his original bandmates, he struggled to replicate the success of the first album. He became known for his unpredictable behavior, and his career slowly fizzled out. What many have overlooked is the quiet financial ruin that followed. Without the big record sales and tours, the money dried up. He retreated from public life, and in the rare interviews he gave over the years, he appeared to be a shadow of his former self, his immense talent and fortune lost to years of struggle. Meeks lost his way after a massive debut, but the next Legends Broke story is actually how his legendary career began. 14. Dave Mustaine, the revenge-fueled rise from nothing. This one is a little different. Dave Mustaine is now a metal icon and the undisputed leader of Megadeth. But his story is forged in the fires of being left with absolutely nothing. In 1983, Mustaine was the lead guitarist for a little band called Metallica. He was a key songwriter and a fiery, talented musician. But his aggressive behavior and clashing personality led to him being abruptly fired. What's crazy to think about is how they did it. They put him on a bus in New York and sent him on a 4-day trip back to California with nothing but his gear and a ticket. He was broke, angry, and humiliated. On that long bus ride, fueled by a desire for revenge, he started writing lyrics on a handbill. Those lyrics would become the foundation for Megadeth. His story is about being financially destitute, but using that moment of desperation as the ultimate motivation. He built an empire from scratch, not just to be successful, but to be faster and heavier than the band that cast him out. His journey from that lonely bus ride to global stardom is one of the most legendary comeback stories in all of music. Mustaine built a career from being broke. The next musician on our list made a choice that cost him a fortune he never even had. 15. Ron McGovney, the man who walked away from millions. You've probably never heard of Ron McGovney, but he was a critical piece of heavy metal history. He was the very first bassist for Metallica. He was there in the garage with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich when they were just kids with a dream. He played on their earliest demos and was part of the band's initial buzz. But the thing is, McGovney quickly realized the rock and roll lifestyle wasn't for him. He grew tired of the clashes within the band, particularly feeling like he was being treated more as a roadie and a source of money than a true bandmate. So, in late 1982, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. He quit. It's crazy to think about, but he walked away just months before the band would record their debut album and begin their meteoric rise to becoming the biggest metal band on the planet. He chose a normal life, becoming a mechanic, while his former bandmates went on to earn hundreds of millions of dollars. He didn't go broke from spending. He gave up a future fortune that is almost impossible to comprehend. McGovney chose to walk away, but the next artist found that even being a hired gun in a huge band doesn't guarantee a lifetime of wealth. 16. Simon Wright, the hired drummer's reality check. Simon Wright has a resume that most drummers would envy. He replaced Phil Rudd in AC/DC in the 80s, playing on multiple albums. After that, he joined the legendary Ronnie James Dio's band. He has played on some of the biggest stages in the world. You might think that a career like that means you're set for life. But the truth be told, the life of a hired gun musician is very different from being a founding member. What most people don't realize is that musicians like Wright are often paid a salary for touring and recording rather than getting a full share of the massive profits from album sales and merchandise. While it's a good living, it's not the same as the multi-million-dollar fortunes of the band leaders. Wright has spoken about the financial realities of his career, explaining that once a tour ends, the paycheck stops. It's a constant cycle of looking for the next gig. It's a sobering look behind the curtain of the rock and roll fantasy, showing that even when you're in a legendary band, financial security is never a guarantee. The life of a hired gun can be tough, but the next singer had a solid career that hit a wall when the music world simply moved on. 17. Joe Lynn Turner, the Rainbow Singer's quiet struggle. Joe Lynn Turner had a powerful voice that landed him some of the most prestigious jobs in rock. He was the frontman for Rainbow after Ronnie James Dio, and he even had a stint singing for Deep Purple. He was a rock veteran with a string of successful albums to his name. But the thing is, even for a singer with his pedigree, the music industry can be unforgiving. As musical tastes changed through the 90s and 2000s, the demand for classic hard rock singers began to fade. The big arena tours and record deals became harder to come by. What many have overlooked is the quiet financial struggle that many legacy artists like Turner have faced. He continued to tour and make music, but on a much smaller scale. He has been open in interviews about the financial hardships, the struggle to make a living in an industry that has completely transformed. It's a story that doesn't involve wild spending or lawsuits, but the simple, grinding reality of a world that has moved on, leaving a talented artist to fight for his financial survival. Turner fought to stay afloat in a changing industry. The next band's breakup didn't just end a career, it created a financial mess. 18. Vernon Reid, the colors that faded to black. In the late 80s, Living Colour was a lightning bolt. They were a band of incredibly skilled black musicians playing a fusion of heavy metal, funk, and rock that was critically acclaimed and commercially successful. Their debut album Vivid went double platinum, and they won 2 Grammy Awards. Guitarist Vernon Reid was hailed as a virtuoso. They were on a path to becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. But what most people don't realize is how quickly it all fell apart. The band broke up in 1995, right at their peak, due to internal creative conflicts. The sudden stop brought an end to the massive flow of income. Reid and the other members had to pivot and find other ways to make a living. Reid became a respected session musician and producer, but it was a world away from the stadium-level income of Living Colour. It was a classic case of a band with unlimited potential whose internal fractures not only ended their artistic journey, but also forced a complete financial reset on all of its members. A band breakup is a financial shock, but the next artist's story is about the immense cost of simply telling the truth about his own band. 19. Dave Lombardo, the Slayer drummer's battle for pennies. Dave Lombardo is a drumming god. His revolutionary playing with Slayer defined the sound of thrash metal. For years, he was part of one of the most revered and intense bands in history. You'd assume he was a very wealthy man. But the thing is, in 2013, Lombardo discovered a shocking truth. He claimed that despite the band's endless touring, he and his bandmate Jeff Hanneman were only seeing a tiny fraction of the money. He said that up to 90% of the tour income was being deducted for fees and manager commissions, leaving the actual artists with scraps. When he tried to get a look at the band's financial books and demanded a fairer contract, he was fired right before a major tour. It's crazy to think about, but one of the founding members of Slayer was let go for asking where the money was going. The ordeal exposed the often shady accounting of the music business and left Lombardo out of a job, forced to start new projects to support himself after decades of service to a legendary band. Lombardo fought for his fair share, but our final star had a different problem. He was too generous for his own good. 20. Nikki Sixx, the man who gave it all away. Nikki Sixx, the mastermind behind Motley Crue, has a story filled with incredible highs and devastating lows. During the band's peak, he was a multimillionaire who spent lavishly. But his story of being broke is different from the others. After years of struggling with a life-threatening lifestyle of excess, Sixx finally got clean. This newfound clarity changed his perspective on everything, including money. What's often overlooked is that in his journey of recovery, he made a conscious decision to detach from his material wealth. In his book, he talks about a period where he gave away his possessions and lived a much simpler life. Furthermore, his early contracts with the band were notoriously bad, giving him a smaller piece of the pie than you would expect for the main songwriter. He eventually renegotiated, but his path to sobriety and his earlier business deals meant his fortune wasn't always secure. His story is less about going broke from bad luck and more about a man who had to lose everything, including his attachment to money, in order to find himself and ultimately build an even bigger and more stable empire as a sober musician, author, and radio host. Fame, money, and a whole lot of ego. It's a dangerous mix that has turned some of heavy metal's biggest stars into its most hated figures. These are the shocking stories of bad decisions and unforgivable actions that ruined legacies. Believe it or not, one rocker's behavior at a concert sparked a full-blown riot. 1. Lars Ulrich. Kicking off our list at the #1 spot is Lars Ulrich, the drummer and co-founder of the biggest heavy metal band in history, Metallica. From their early days as thrash metal pioneers to their status as global stadium-filling superstars, Lars has been there every step of the way. He's the band's spokesman, the businessman, and one of the main creative forces. He's also, for many, the most hated man in metal. The hatred for Lars really exploded in the year 2000. That was the year Metallica spearheaded a lawsuit against a new file-sharing service called Napster. Suddenly, a band that was built on an anti-establishment image was taking its own fans to court for downloading their music for free. The most shocking fact is that they delivered a list of over 300,000 Napster users who they wanted to be banned from the service. Lars Ulrich became the face of this fight, seen as a greedy, spoiled rock star who was out of touch with his own audience. On top of that, for years he has been criticized for his drumming skills, with many calling him sloppy and overrated. This combination of perceived greed and questionable talent has made him the ultimate villain for a huge portion of the metal community. Being seen as greedy is one thing, but our next musician is hated for a single, shocking act on stage that crossed a line for everyone. 2. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo was the voice of a generation of metalheads. As the frontman for Pantera, he changed the game in the 90s. His aggressive, powerful vocals and charismatic yet intimidating stage presence helped make Pantera one of the biggest metal bands in the world. After Pantera, he continued with successful bands like Down and Superjoint Ritual. He was, for a long time, a true metal god. But in 2016, at a tribute concert for his late Pantera bandmate, Dimebag Darrell, Phil Anselmo did something that would tarnish his legacy forever. At the end of the show, he gave what appeared to be a Nazi salute to the crowd and shouted, "White Power." The backlash was immediate and massive. To put it mildly, the metal community was outraged, while Phil quickly apologized, claiming it was a stupid, drunken joke. For many, the damage was done. People pointed to past instances where he had made questionable comments on stage and to the controversial lyrics of some of his side projects. That one ugly moment on stage has followed him ever since, forcing fans to question the character of a man they once called a hero. An ugly moment on stage is one thing, but our next figure's story involves real-world crimes so dark they became the stuff of legend. Varg Vikernes. At number 3, we have perhaps the most infamous figure in all of black metal, Varg Vikernes. As the sole musician behind the project Burzum, Varg created some of the most influential music in the genre. It was atmospheric, raw, and hypnotic. But his music is now forever linked to his terrible actions. In the early 90s in Norway, Varg was a central part of the black metal Inner Circle. This group became notorious for a series of church arsons, burning down historic wooden churches as a statement against Christianity. Varg was convicted for several of these fires. But that's not even the worst of it. The thing nobody tells you is that the scene was filled with tension and rivalry, especially between Varg and his one-time friend and bandmate, Euronymous from the band Mayhem. In 1993, this tension exploded. Varg went to Euronymous' apartment in Oslo, and an altercation occurred that ended with Euronymous losing his life. Varg was convicted of this act and spent 15 years in prison. On top of all this, he has promoted deeply hateful and racist ideologies for years, making him not just a controversial musician, but a figure of pure hate for almost everyone. Varg's anger led to real-world tragedy, but our next musician channeled his anger into a 40-year-long grudge against his old band. 4. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine is the fiery red-headed leader of the thrash metal giant Megadeth. He's a phenomenal guitarist and songwriter, and Megadeth is rightfully considered one of the most important bands in metal history. But the story of Dave Mustaine will always be tied to the band that he started in, Metallica. In 1983, he was kicked out of Metallica right before they recorded their first album, due to his aggressive behavior and issues with substances. This lit a fire under him. He formed Megadeth with the single-minded goal of being faster, heavier, and more successful than Metallica. What many overlooked is that this feud has never, ever ended. For decades, in nearly every interview, Mustaine has found a way to bring up his old band, complaining about how he was treated and how much credit he deserves for their early sound. He also developed a reputation for being incredibly difficult to work with, constantly firing members of his own band. In recent years, he has also alienated fans with his strong, outspoken, conservative, and religious views. His undeniable talent is often overshadowed by what many see as a massive chip on his shoulder. While Mustaine's feuds were legendary in the thrash scene, our next figure became the face of a completely different and widely despised metal subgenre. 5. Fred Durst. In the late 90s, nu metal took over the world, and at the very front of that movement was Fred Durst, the red hat-wearing singer of Limp Bizkit. The band mixed heavy metal riffs with hip-hop rhythms and rapping, and they became one of the biggest bands on the planet. Their album, Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog-Flavored Water, sold over 1 million copies in its first week. But with great fame came great hate. Fred Durst became the symbol for everything people disliked about nu metal. He was seen as a douchey frat boy, with his backward cap and arrogant attitude. The most shocking fact is that his band was widely blamed for the chaos and violence that erupted during their set at the infamous Woodstock '99 festival, where Durst was accused of hyping up an already aggressive crowd. He also made headlines for lying about his relationships with famous pop stars. For an entire generation of rock fans, Fred Durst was the poster boy for dumbed-down, commercially driven, and obnoxious rock music. Durst was the bad boy of the '90s, but our next artist has built his entire career on being the modern-day villain of the rock scene. 6. Ronnie Radke. Ronnie Radke, the singer for the band Falling in Reverse, is one of the most polarizing figures in modern rock music. He first got famous as the original singer of the band Escape the Fate, but was let go because of his legal troubles. While he was in prison for his involvement in a physical altercation, he formed a new band, Falling in Reverse. Since then, he's built a career on being the bad guy. He's famous for his ego-driven feuds with other musicians, critics, and even fans on social media. His lyrics are often self-aggrandizing, talking about how great he is and how much everyone else is terrible. He gets into online arguments almost daily and seems to enjoy the negative attention. What many overlook is that his behavior isn't just online. He's been accused of on-stage antics that have put people in danger and has a long history of clashing with others. For his loyal fans, he's an honest and misunderstood artist. But for a massive number of people in the music scene, he's just an arrogant egomaniac who gives rock music a bad name. Radke's bad boy persona is built on ego and online fights, but the story of our next musician involves a crime so shocking it shattered his band's good guy image forever. 7. Tim Lambesis. At number 7 is a story that is just plain sad and shocking. Tim Lambesis was the frontman for the San Diego metalcore band As I Lay Dying. In the 2000s, they were one of the biggest and most respected bands in the scene. They were even known as a Christian metal band, and their lyrics often dealt with struggles of faith and finding hope. They were nominated for a Grammy and had a massive, devoted fan base. Then, in 2013, the music world was stunned by the news that Tim Lambesis had been arrested. The reason was almost unbelievable. He was convicted of attempting to hire someone to harm his estranged wife. He had met with an undercover agent posing as a professional for hire. The news sent shockwaves through the metal and Christian music communities. A man who sang about hope and faith had gone to a very dark place. He served time in prison and has since been released and has reformed the band. But for a huge number of fans, what he did is unforgivable. It was a betrayal of everything his music supposedly stood for. A crime that sends you to prison is one thing, but our next musician is hated for something much more common in metal, having a really big mouth. 8. Kerry King. Kerry King, the bald, tattooed guitarist of the legendary thrash metal band Slayer, is next on the list. Slayer is one of the big four of thrash metal, known for their incredibly fast, aggressive, and dark music. For decades, they were one of the most respected and uncompromising bands in the genre. Kerry King, with his blistering guitar solos and angry stage presence, was a huge part of that. So why the hate? The thing is, Kerry King has a really big mouth, and he's not afraid to use it. Over the years, he has become famous for trash-talking other bands in interviews. He's called Metallica sellouts. He's made fun of Iron Maiden. He's insulted countless other musicians, big and small. For some fans, this is just Kerry being honest and metal. But for many others, it comes across as arrogant and disrespectful. He's also been criticized by other musicians for his style of guitar playing, particularly his wild use of the whammy bar, which some see as a gimmicky and lazy way to play a solo. This reputation as the grumpy old man of metal has earned him plenty of enemies. Kerry King is known for his verbal aggression, But our next musician from the Norwegian black metal scene has a reputation for real-world violence. 9. Gaal. Once again, we journey to the frosty shores of Norway to talk about Gaal, the former singer of the black metal band Gorgoroth. During his time with the band in the early 2000s, Gorgoroth became infamous for their live shows. One concert in Krakow, Poland, was so extreme that it resulted in a police investigation. Gaal was a terrifying frontman with his piercing stare and intimidating presence. But the real trouble started with his behavior offstage. He was involved in a very public and messy legal battle with his former bandmates over the rights to the Gorgoroth name, which he eventually lost. What many overlooked were his serious legal troubles. He was convicted of assault and spent time in prison for an incident where a man was held at his home for several hours and subjected to what was described as ritualistic mistreatment. After leaving Gorgoroth, fans were also highly critical of the new bands he formed, calling the music inferior to his old work. His combination of a violent reputation and a bitter band dispute has made him a deeply disliked figure. While Gaal's reputation is built on darkness and intimidation, our next figure is hated for the exact opposite, being a cartoonish symbol of corporate greed. 10. Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons, the long-tongued demon from the legendary band Kiss, stomps in at number 10. Kiss changed the game in the 70s. They weren't just a band, they were a phenomenon. With their comic book makeup, explosive live shows, and simple, catchy hard rock, they became heroes to millions of kids. Gene Simmons, as the co-founder and bass player, was one of the masterminds behind it all. But as the years went on, Gene became known for something else: his love of money. To put it mildly, he would put the Kiss logo on anything that would sell. There were Kiss lunchboxes, Kiss coffins, Kiss air fresheners, you name it. For many fans, this focus on merchandise cheapened the band's legacy. He also became known for his arrogant statements in the media, like famously declaring that rock is dead. He is also known for claiming to have had relations with thousands of women on the road, even taking pictures to document them. For many, Gene Simmons represents the moment when the rebellious spirit of rock was replaced by corporate sellout culture. Gene Simmons turned his band into a brand, but our next musician is infamous for a truly ghoulish act involving his own bandmates' passing. 11. Euronymous. We now return to the grim world of Norwegian black metal with Øystein Aarseth, better known as Euronymous. He was the guitarist and leader of the band Mayhem, one of the most important and influential bands in the entire black metal scene. He was more than just a musician. He was a central figure who ran a record label and a record shop called Helvete, which means hell in Norwegian. It was the meeting place for everyone in the scene. Mayhem's story is filled with darkness, but one event stands above the rest. In 1991, the band's singer, a man known as Dead, ended his own journey. What Euronymous did next is what earned him a permanent spot in the Hall of Infamy. Instead of calling the authorities right away, he allegedly went and bought a disposable camera. He then rearranged some items in the room and took graphic photographs of the scene. The most shocking fact is that one of these pictures was later used as the cover for a bootleg album. He was also rumored to have made necklaces out of pieces of his departed friend's skull. For many, this was an act of ultimate disrespect that went far beyond any attempt to be evil or metal. Exploiting a tragedy within the band is one thing, but our next artist became the unwilling face of a national tragedy he had nothing to do with. 12. Marilyn Manson. Brian Warner, known to the world as Marilyn Manson, is no stranger to controversy. Since the mid-90s, he has made a career out of being the person your parents warned you about. With his creepy makeup, industrial metal sound, and shocking stage shows, he became a superstar and a symbol of rebellion for a generation of teenagers. The thing is, his scary image made him the perfect scapegoat. In 1999, after the tragic events at Columbine High School, the media was desperate for someone to blame. They wrongly reported that the two young men responsible were huge Marilyn Manson fans who wore his t-shirts and were inspired by his music. This was later proven to be completely false, but the damage was done. Manson became the face of the tragedy in the eyes of the public. He received threats, his concerts were protested, and he was blamed for corrupting America's youth. More recently, his career has been derailed by numerous serious allegations from former partners about his personal conduct, adding a new and much darker layer to his controversial legacy. While Manson became a scapegoat, our next musician is hated for a very real tragedy he caused behind the wheel of a car. 13. Vince Neil. Vince Neil, the blonde-haired singer of the glam metal band Motley Crue, takes the 13th spot. In the 80s, Motley Crue was the definition of rock and roll excess. They were the kings of the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles, known for their wild parties, crazy outfits, and huge, catchy rock anthems. Vince Neil was the pretty boy frontman whose voice powered hits like Girls, Girls, Girls and Dr. Feelgood. But the party came to a tragic and abrupt halt in 1984. Vince was at a party with members of the band Hanoi Rocks. He and their drummer, a man named Razzle, decided to go on a trip to the store. Vince was behind the wheel when he lost control of his car and crashed into another vehicle. Razzle was lost in the incident, and two people in the other car were seriously injured. Vince was charged with vehicular manslaughter. The thing nobody tells you is that he only ended up serving 19 days in jail. For many people, this was a shocking injustice. They felt a rich and famous rock star had gotten away with a slap on the wrist for a terrible tragedy. It's a dark shadow that has followed Vince Neil for his entire career. Vince Neil's story involves one night of terrible judgment, but our next frontman is infamous for a career filled with chaotic behavior and concert-ending tantrums. 14. Axl Rose. At number 14 is the fiery and unpredictable frontman of Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose. In the late 80s and early 90s, Guns N' Roses was the biggest band in the world. Their album Appetite for Destruction is one of the best-selling debut albums of all time. Axl Rose was the ultimate rock star with a one-of-a-kind voice and a charismatic but dangerous stage presence. That danger often spilled over into real-life chaos. Axl became notorious for starting concerts hours late, sometimes not even taking the stage until after midnight. He would often go on long, angry rants in the middle of songs, complaining about the media, his bandmates, or even the fans. The most shocking fact is that his actions sometimes led to full-blown riots. In 1991 near St. Louis, he famously jumped into the crowd to confront a fan with a camera, then stormed off stage, leading to a massive riot that caused millions in damages. This, combined with feuds that tore the original band apart and numerous accusations about his personal behavior, turned him from a rock god into a public enemy for many. Axl's onstage antics caused riots, but our next legendary showman became infamous for a different kind of onstage chaos, one that involved a live animal. 15. Ozzy Osbourne. The Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne, lands at number 15. It's hard to overstate Ozzy's importance. As the original singer of Black Sabbath, he helped invent heavy metal. As a solo artist, he became one of the biggest stars in the world. He's a living legend. But you see, he's also been a lightning rod for controversy his entire career. The stories are infamous. There was the time in 1982 when he bit the head off a real bat on stage, thinking it was a rubber toy. There were the countless tales of his wild, substance-fueled antics on the road. But the hate also came from a much more serious place. In the 80s, he was sued by the parents of a young man who took his own life. The parents claimed their son was influenced by Ozzy's song "Solution," which they believed was about ending one's own life. Ozzy has always said the song was about the sad passing of his friend, AC/DC singer Bon Scott. While Ozzy was found not responsible, the incident, combined with his chaotic public image, made him a major target for parent groups and religious organizations who saw him as a corrupting influence. While Ozzy's controversies were often about his wild behavior, our next rock and roll icon is disliked for a very specific and uncomfortable hobby. 16. Lemmy Kilmister. It might be shocking to see a legend like Lemmy Kilmister on this list. As the frontman of Motorhead, he was a true icon of rock and roll. His gravelly voice, his loud and fast bass playing, and his hard-living lifestyle made him a hero to millions. For over 40 years, Motorhead was one of the most consistent and beloved bands in music. Lemmy was, for many, the living spirit of rock and roll. But there was a side to him that made a lot of people very uncomfortable. Lemmy was an avid collector of historical military memorabilia, and his collection included a lot of items from Nazi Germany. What many overlooked was the sheer volume of it. He didn't just have a few items. His apartment was filled with daggers, flags, and uniforms from that era. He even wore an Iron Cross and a German-style hat in photo shoots. In 2008, he was even investigated by German authorities. When asked about it, Lemmy always said he wasn't a sympathizer. He claimed he just liked the uniforms and the evil look of the stuff. But for many, especially in Europe, collecting and displaying these kinds of symbols, no matter the reason, was just not okay. It remains a dark and confusing spot on the legacy of an otherwise beloved icon. Lemmy's image was authentically rugged, but our next musician is hated by many for having an image they see as completely inauthentic and manufactured. 17. Andy Biersack. Next on our list is Andy Biersack, the lead singer of the American band Black Veil Brides. The band emerged in the late 2000s with a look that was a total throwback to the 80s glam metal scene. They wore makeup, had big, spiky hair, and wore tight leather pants. Their music was a blend of modern metalcore with the catchy, anthem-like choruses of bands like Motley Crue and Kiss. This whole package made them a target for a lot of hate, especially from online trolls. Andy Biersack, with his model-like looks and dramatic stage presence, became the main focus of this dislike. The band was labeled as posers, who were all about fashion and image rather than musical substance. Critics said they were just a cheap copy of an older, outdated style. The thing is, they also became incredibly popular, especially with a younger generation of fans who loved their look and their message of being an outcast. This only made the haters angrier. Andy Biersack represents a major divide in the metal community between those who value raw authenticity and those who embrace theatricality and style. Andy Biersack is accused of copying an old style, but our next frontman is hated by his original fans for abandoning his style completely. 18. Ole Sykes. At number 18, we find Ole Sykes, the frontman for the English band Bring Me the Horizon. When they first started in the mid-2000s, they were one of the heaviest and most chaotic bands around. Their early music was a style called deathcore, known for its super-fast drumming, down-tuned guitars, and deep guttural vocals from Sykes. They were a band that parents were genuinely scared of. But as the years went on, a strange thing started to happen. With each new album, the band got a little less heavy. The screaming started to be replaced by singing. The chaotic song structures became more like pop songs. And their latest albums sound more like something you'd hear on Top 40 radio than a metal station, with electronic beats and very personal lyrics. For the fans who loved their early brutal sound, this was an unforgivable act of selling out. Ole Sykes, as the face of the band, gets most of the blame. He's seen as a genre hopper who abandoned his heavy metal credentials as soon as it became convenient, chasing trends instead of staying true to his roots. While Ole Sykes slowly moved his band towards pop, our next artist built a career on mixing pop melodies with metal from the very beginning, all while in costume. 19. Tobias Forge. The mysterious and theatrical leader of the Swedish band Ghost, Tobias Forge, comes in at number 19. Ghost is one of the most unique bands in modern metal. Tobias performs as a character, first as a demonic pope-like figure named Papa Emeritus, and now as a character called Cardinal Copia. The rest of the band members are just known as nameless ghouls, and they all wear identical masks. Their music is a strange mix of 70s-style hard rock, pop melodies, and lyrics about Satan. This combination has made them incredibly popular. They've won a Grammy Award and play in huge arenas, but for many hardcore metal fans, Ghost is a joke. They say the band is campy and not truly heavy. They see the costumes and theatrics as a gimmick designed to sell records to people who don't actually like real metal. Tobias Forge is seen as the mastermind behind this dilution of the genre. To put it mildly, he's viewed as an actor playing a metal star, creating pop music in a spooky costume. The hatred comes from a sense of gatekeeping, a feeling that Ghost isn't metal enough to be as successful as they are. Tobias Forge is seen as not metal enough by some, but our next singer faced a similar backlash when he completely changed his band's sound after just 2 albums. 20 M Shadows. At number 20, we have M Shadows, the lead singer of Avenged Sevenfold. This band exploded out of Huntington Beach, California, in the early 2000s as a metalcore band. Their album, Waking the Fallen, was a huge hit in that scene, full of screaming vocals, heavy guitar riffs, and fast drumming. They were seen as one of the most promising young bands in heavy music. But then came their next album, City of Evil, in 2005. And everything changed. What many overlooked was that the screaming was almost completely gone, replaced by M Shadow's clean melodic singing. The music shifted from metalcore to a style more like classic heavy metal and hard rock, with big guitar solos and epic song structures. To their old fans, this was the ultimate betrayal. The band was immediately labeled as sellouts, who had abandoned their roots to chase mainstream success. The thing is, it worked. The band became one of the biggest rock acts in the world. But for a whole generation of metalcore kids, Avenged Sevenfold was the band that broke their hearts, and M Shadows was the man who led the charge. Changing your sound is one way to anger fans, but our next singer managed to alienate people with his outspoken political views instead. 21. David Draiman. The man with one of the most recognizable voices in modern metal, David Draiman of the band Disturbed, takes our next spot. You know his signature ooh-wah, ah-ah-ah sound from their massive hit, Down with the Sickness. Since the early 2000s, Disturbed has been a giant in the genre, selling millions of albums with their hard-hitting, rhythmic style of metal. Draiman is known for being a very outspoken and intelligent guy. However, that outspoken nature is exactly what has gotten him into trouble with a lot of fans. In recent years, David Draiman has become very vocal about his pro-Israel political views. You see, this is a topic that is incredibly divisive, and he doesn't shy away from sharing his strong opinions on social media. This has led to a huge backlash from fans who disagree with him or who simply don't want politics mixed in with their music. Some have called him a propagandist and have sworn off the band for good. On top of that, from day one, many metal purists have called his band's music sucky or too simple, making him a target for both musical and political reasons. Draiman's controversy comes from his real-world opinions, but our next musician has blurred the line between his disturbing lyrics and his alleged real-world actions. 22. Till Lindemann. Next up is the deep-voiced, fire-loving frontman of the German industrial metal band Rammstein, Till Lindemann. Rammstein is one of the biggest metal bands in the world, famous for their insane live shows that involve more flamethrowers than you can count. Till himself is known for his intense stage presence and his lyrics, which often explore very dark and disturbing themes. One of their most famous songs, Mein Tale, is literally about a man who volunteered to be eaten by another. For years, this was all just part of the show, a way to shock and entertain. But recently, the controversy around Till Lindemann became much more real. Several women have come forward with serious accusations about his behavior after concerts. They describe a system where women were allegedly recruited from the crowd to attend after-parties with the singer, where some felt pressured into uncomfortable situations. While investigations were launched, the situation has cast a dark cloud over the band. For many fans, the line between dark artistic expression and real-life misconduct has been crossed, and they can no longer separate the singer from the serious allegations against him.